Yes, indeed. It's a brand new way. In fact, it's the largest fire department in the country that is now using drones. You're looking at the newest addition to the LACD Fire Department. 2 of 6 drones. Drones that transmit a live feed, a good, clear picture at the command center. He said a drone would have been invaluable. He said, now the department knows what they have and what it can do, and it's opened up a whole new way of fighting fires.
This drone, equipped with an infrared camera, checked for hotspots and measured the temperature.
The helicopters flew that information, flew that same path the night before, but they were only able to put it on plots on a map. We were able to fly it, provide that information.
Good evening and most welcome to this Werminar, the 4th in order of our series of Werminar. I must say that must have been the coolest introduction ever for a webinar, I think. My name is Marcus Bergshow. I am CEO of Werma, and we at Werma are very excited for this upcoming hour. As some of you know, and maybe some of you don't, Werma is a supplier of equipment to fire brigades and military in the Nordic countries, the Baltics, and northern part of Europe. For this webinar, we have several of hundreds of people from 5 different countries tuning in, and this is something we are very proud of and thankful for. In previous webinars, we have listened to members of Swedish Parliament, we have listened on editors-in-chiefs, and also a hockey coach from the Swedish Elite League. But tonight, we will listen to Chief Richard Fields and firefighter David Danielson, both from Los Angeles Fire Department. They will talk about brush fires in California and how the usage of drones has become an important tool in their way of approaching brush fires. But first, however, some information and rules. Please all turn off your cameras and microphones if you didn't already do that. This webinar will be recorded and shortly be published on our website and also on our YouTube channel. This is, if you want to listen again, or show people that maybe have missed this. We will do about 60 minutes for this webinar, and if you have questions, please write them in the chat function, and then we will have a Q&A, questions and answer, maybe the last 15 minutes or something like that. So, guys, Chief Fields, Mr. Danielson, please turn on your microphones. Are you with me?
Hello, Marcus.
Hello, David.
Good morning,
Chief
Marcus.
Fields, good morning, Chief Fields. Nice to see you both. I suppose it's morning time in LA, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so
wonderful.
I should say good kval to alla vara vana i Scandinavia.
Okay, yeah, David, you've been to Norway a lot, I heard.
Yeah, right? That's about all I know.
Oh, perfect. Okay, guys, let's get this Werminar starting. I think Chief Fields, you're up first, and I think also please introduce yourself first, maybe, and then when you're ready, please just let us know, and we will put your slides up and running.
All right, very good. Marcus and all the team there at Werminar, we appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to such a large group, and the opportunity, obviously, to highlight our fire department and our UAS program, both of which Dave and I are an integral part of. I get to stand out in front of the crowds and get a little camera time every now and again, but people like Dave and the rest of our team are really the backbone and the reason why our program is so well known and so well established, not only in the United States but abroad. So, our program started with a small idea back in 2015, and as we continue to research and look into the use of unmanned vehicles in our response matrix, we realized that there were a number of areas in which drones could be extremely effective, allowing for our command teams to make more precise decisions because they had more accurate information, and they could use our resources, including our firefighters and boots on the ground, more effectively. And ultimately, the goal was to be able to put this tool into use to increase firefighter safety, where we could more accurately determine the environments we were putting firefighters in, with visual aspects, as well as the other tools that the drone brings, to make sure that we were keeping our firefighters as safe as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about our traditional way of fighting brush fires. I spent a lot of time in wildland firefighting in our traditional way, leading crews and teams all along throughout California in fighting brush fires. And I'll talk a little bit about the integration, how we've integrated drones into our matrix and what it's meant for us. And then my partner and my lead pilot, Dave Danielson, will take it from there and talk a little bit more specifics about the program itself. So, Marcus, if you're ready to start the slideshow, we'll begin. And we'll be happy throughout, obviously, to take any questions. And I believe that our contact information will be made available to everyone who has attended today for any further comment or discussion. So we'll begin. We'll go to the next slide, please. So just again, we have a very unique environment here in Los Angeles in the Southern California region, because we don't deal with one type of wildland. We have some local wildland areas that we regularly fight fire in. We have areas that interface with state land as well as federal land. And so we have to come up with plans and contingencies and resource allocation for all of those possibilities. Specifically to Los Angeles and the region, because of our mountain ranges and the large coastal influence and the oceans that we have just to the west of us, weather plays a significant part in our wildfire fighting tactics. And a lot of that is as a result of the winds and the topography of the Southern California region, the mountain ranges that create, you'll see in a later slide, some of the chutes which create what we call the Santa Ana winds. And that usually happens in late August through November, sometimes later on into the year, which significantly changes how we fight fire due to them being pushed by the winds. We'll talk a little bit about our equipment and then how we interact with outside agencies. Next slide, please. We spoke about that, the topography, and let's move to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about topography and wind. The mountains that we're kind of encased in this in a kind of a triangle of mountain ranges, the largest of which is our Santa Monica Mountains. And then to the south, to the north and the east of us are the federal forest, the Angeles National Forest, and a little further to the east is the Cleveland National Forest. Those are all managed by the federal government, but also because we are pocketed in that area, surrounded by areas like Griffith Park, and those small areas, Griffith Park that we mentioned, unless you've visited Los Angeles, you're not very familiar with that, but just wanted to highlight some of the areas in which we normally fight fires in. But I'll bring specific attention, the second to the last slide, the Porter Ranch, Sunland, Tujunga area, and then the last bullet point where it mentions Malibu, Ventura, and our Santa Monica Mountains specifically, because that's where we have the majority of our interface, where a fire that would start in one of those areas can quickly move to a larger area, whether it's state responsibility or federal responsibility land. And now there is the potential of that, 100-acre brush fire now growing to the thousands of acres and being a major campaign fire in which we find ourselves working in quite often in this area. Next slide, please. So this is just a visual to kind of encapsulate what I've talked about. If you look at the top of the slide there, that is the Santa Monica Mountain Range. And all of the area in lighter gray is the city of Los Angeles. To the green, obviously, is the ocean. And if you look at that, the small carve out on the right there is our harbor area. So all of Los Angeles is about 476 square miles, of which Los Angeles Fire Department is responsible for. And our biggest area of concern when it comes to wildland is as that gray area pushes into what you see on the topographic illustration of the mountains. And the faster that we can get resources in place and keep that brush fire to a small footprint, the easier it will be for us to manage. And ultimately, our goal is to keep it from getting into the mountains, keeping it from getting into the forest, which requires a much larger deployment of resources. And that's our regular challenge. And as we will talk later, is where we saw extreme value in using the drones. Next slide, please. The weather plays, again, a significant has a significant impact on how wildland fires react. As long as they stay what we call terrain driven or just run along the normal topography and burning it in the normal brush without any wind, we have a much greater chance of capturing or keeping that fire to a small footprint. In areas where the brush is surrounded by either man-made or natural barriers that do not burn, such as waterways, roadways, freeways, things like that, or other man-made structures, it reduces the risk, even if we have winds or high temperatures. But in the event that the humidity decreases, temperature increases, and then we have winds over 15 miles an hour, is that kind of trifecta that ultimately could have a significant impact on a fire if it starts, and our ability to manage it in a small footprint. Next slide, please. This is just another example. So in that previous slide that you saw, that that gray that pushed into the green area. You'll see the Santa Monica Mountains there. The San Gabriel Mountains are just to the north of us as well. But that larger range is the Santa Monica Mountains. And again, I mentioned the majority of the weather influence, in addition to some high pressure that we may have or low pressure at certain times of the year, are the winds. And those Santa Ana winds that we were referring to earlier, as they push down through the coast, create a significant impact on the pressure that's put on the basin area where we are, as well as the speed at which a fire can move. Next slide, please. This slide, if you notice the white, that's actually smoke, and if you see the small area there in red along the coast is an actual image of an active fire. Not currently, but that is an image of an active fire, just to give you a visual of the impact of the Santa Ana winds. If you look out at that, that's pushing up to 30 miles offshore. That just shows how strong the winds are. So as we're trying to fight fires that are being pushed by the wind, if they were moving in the opposite direction into the mountains, where we don't have the population, then some of the urgency would be less. But because that wind influence, along with the low pressure, pushes all of that fire and fire spread into populated areas, that is why we have the urgency to contain that fire to a small footprint, because our only true stop, other than that, is the ocean. We try not to burn up too many homes and people's property in the meantime, and try to keep it very small. I'll move to the next slide, please. I talked about the impact of weather again, and this is that low pressure system. This is looking from the Santa Monica Mountains toward the west, and just a really good illustration of the type of weather systems that we are often impacted by. The low pressure system, correction, a high pressure system with a pressure system that keeps that smoke inside the pocket the way that it's doing there, sometimes works in our advantage. When the pressure lifts and that fire is able to expand, or the plume can grow, it also increases the fire activity and the rate of spread as it pushes down that mountain range, aided by those Santa Ana winds. We have a real fight on our hands. Fire spread can be up to 10 times what it would be under normal circumstances if we were simply fighting it in the terrain. So we have a significant challenge on our hands, not only in pre-planning for these types of weather events and the times of year where we anticipate they will come, but also in coordinating the number of resources we would need to have pre-deployed in specific areas of the city to be able to fight these fires as they start, again, with the objective of keeping it small so that we're not having a major impact on the populated areas of Los Angeles. Next slide, please. We're fortunate here in Los Angeles, and it was mentioned in the illustration or the video early on. We have the luxury of being not only a very large fire department, but we are resource heavy. We are sometimes can be a gift and a curse. At any given time, I can call for any one of our 7 helicopters, which have patient lifting capabilities or can carry a payload, some up to 12, I believe up to 15 passengers, and also have the ability to drop water. So in addition to those helicopters, which are our main line of defense in slowing the spread of wildfires, We also have brush patrols, which are smaller vehicles that are staffed by 2 people that have a small tank on them that patrol our major brush areas to try to keep fires small or prevent things that could create fires. And then our water tenders and we'll show you an example of that later, helitenders, which tend to the helicopters at pre-designated landing zones and maintenance zones for fueling up with fuel and water so that we can continue to drop water on the brush fires is another advantage that we have, as well as bulldozers. So if you kind of look at our chest strategy is to get the helicopters to drop water on the main body of the fire. The dozers that you will see, the large bulldozers would go well ahead, maybe miles ahead, to cut fire breaks, which would be to remove all vegetation in an area anywhere from 8 feet wide up to 30 feet wide, which gives us a fire break that we can work from to reduce the amount of fuel that a fire has to burn. And then the next line is actually putting boots on the ground, our firefighters on the ground that deploy fire hose to put out the fire and start to create this box around a fire. And so if ever you hear the term percentage of containment, basically what that means is how much of the fire we have actually been able to get hose around to start to mop it up and not only put the active flame out, but to cool that entire area so that there's no possibility of reignition of the fire when all of those elements converge again. Next slide, please. Just a couple of examples. I spoke about our boots on the ground. That top picture is just an illustration of how our firefighters work on the ground to mitigate fires, some of the equipment that we wear, which is our training and commitment of resources, training, and equipment to fight brush fires has increased significantly over the last 15 years. It was, we were known, if you look at the picture, the second picture there, those are considered type 1 fire apparatus, and they're nice and shiny and pretty for a reason. It's because they typically stay on pavement. And we were known for being able to we do very well at protecting structures, in fighting fires in the urban environment, but not so much in the wildland. And we've really increased our training, the availability of equipment and our skills actually fighting fire in the wildlands, which has resulted in us having very skilled task forces of people, as well as the configuration you see in the second slide, which is our Type 1 resources, which are led by a battalion chief or someone in my rank that has what's called a strike team leader certification. Extensive amount of training to lead crews in the brush, understanding the wildland environment, matched against the capabilities of the resources that would come out on that type of apparatus. About 6 years ago, we brought on Type 3 apparatus in collaboration with the California Office of Emergency Management. They supplied the apparatus, we supplied the training and the people. And that Type 3 apparatus is 4-wheel drive, has a much higher center of gravity, a smaller tank, and is much more capable and is designed specifically for off-road and for fighting fires in the forest environment, in areas that could not be accessed by a larger, heavier Type 1 apparatus. And that is also led by battalion chiefs like me, or someone specifically qualified in the wildland to lead a strike team of those engines. Next slide, please. We spoke a little bit about water tenders. Obviously, in the city or the urban environment, we have the benefit of having a pretty robust water system. In fighting a typical fire in the Los Angeles area, in our urban environment, we can connect to a pre-plumbed fire hydrant that usually maintains about 60 pounds of pressure at all times. So we have a significant amount of water supply, and then which is augmented by the pumping capacity of our Type 1 engines. So we can put about 1,500 gallons of water per minute on any given fire. However, in our wildland environment, we don't have that benefit, and we have to basically bring the water with us. We have the benefit of having two water tenders, as you see there. They're both 2,500 gallons, and again, a four-wheel drive, have a high center of gravity, and can access areas that a normal apparatus would not, and are extremely valuable when we need that continuous water supply. We can use other equipment to, portable tanks, things like that, that help us to keep the firefight going in the absence of a pre-plumbed or man-made water supply for fighting fires. And these two examples, Water Tender 77, and Water Tender 88, those just indicate the fire stations where they are currently located. One would cover the northeast end of the San Fernando Valley. The other would cover the northwest and southwest regions of the valley, so that we kind of are able to box our highest potential fire spread in with resources like water tenders. Next slide, please. We also have the ability to use hand crews that are specifically trained for fighting fire only in the wildland. One of the reasons that we, and thanks to Dave again for adding this in, this specific slide, our LAFD crew just speaks to our ability to augment our sworn resources, our firefighters that work in the fire station on a daily basis. This Crew 3 is specifically made up of young men and women who are interested in careers in the fire service, who have not yet been employed by the fire department. They receive training, equipment, and supervision from fire department members, specifically in fighting fires in the wildland. We use people from our cadet program who are interested in also fighting fire in the wildland, and train them to be dispatched. And if you can see in that picture, we have about 50 people, young men and women, who are currently involved in that program. And it gives them also that kind of path forward, an opportunity to seek careers in the fire service. Even if it's not with Los Angeles City Fire Department, they make themselves more valuable by having this added skill set, and are certainly an asset to us in fighting wildland fires here in the city of Los Angeles. So it's kind of a twofold benefit to us, as well as an added benefit to the members or the young men and women who are involved in the program itself. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, we are in Region 1. There are 6 areas that are inside of that region, and we are bordered to the north by Santa Barbara County, and then to the south by Orange County. However, we do have mutual aid agreements with all of those surrounding counties, where in the event of a larger brush fire that either starts in the city or starts in one of those regions, we still send a pre-designated number of resources to help out, as they would with us at a larger fire in the city of Los Angeles. And this is just to give you an example of some of the other resources that we have outside of our initial city. The interesting thing about our city, and I spoke about how large our fire department is, at any given time, we can deploy 50 Type 1 fire engines with supportive resources immediately. And that's a benefit that really no other department around us, and very few departments in the country have the ability to do. So in circumstances where in any other environment or any other agency, a small fire could quickly become large because they simply don't have the resources to uh, send to address that issue, or they don't have the resources immediately. So a lot of the fires that break out in the city of Los Angeles, because we are so resource rich, we have the ability to contain them in a small footprint. However, our neighboring partners don't, and it's why we have this mutual aid agreement to send and share resources across the region so that we can mitigate these fires before they get large. Next slide, please. Talk a little bit about LA. That last bullet point, the cities of Santa Monica, famous for the Santa Monica Pier and the beach area. You guys may know about that, at least from looking at the internet if you haven't visited California. And then obviously everyone knows what Beverly Hills is, the home of the stars and the rich and famous. And those are some of each of those cities have their own fire departments. Although small, they are part of our local area, and we provide mutual aid assistance to them. Although they are not as impacted by the wildland, specifically Culver City, but Santa Monica, the Santa Monica Mountains, and some of the areas in the Palisades area, and some of the state land resides in Santa Monica. So we provide a significant amount of mutual aid resources to them as well. Next slide, please. So just we'll just the next couple of slides, we'll deal with what our brush dispatch looks like, and will be a great segue into the next portion of this presentation. Our brush dispatch, what we do is people that are in my position will set up an initial incident command. We have a pre-existing incident command system that allows us to have a better span of control as the number of resources that are dispatched to an incident grows. Obviously, I would assume that command post is a familiar term. It is our fixed location for managing an incident within the city. And then we obviously provide a staging location that where we have all of our resources at the ready, who are specifically assigned to that fire, to that incident, so that we can give them specific assignments that are determined by the incident command at the command post. Other things that we include in our brush dispatch are specific locations, which helispot, which would include a water supply for helicopters, a clear landing zone, and the crew that manages that helispot, so that the helicopters can maintain a consistent and continuous operation through the duration of the firefight, are things that are automatically added to the dispatch, so that the incident commanders like myself don't have to think about those things. Again, having the benefit of a lot of resources at our disposal. Next slide, please. The following next two slides just kind of give an example of from the dispatcher's side. So from our dispatch center, what that initial brush dispatch would look like. And we would, that is our initial package. We have typically 6 engine companies with support from there's one, if you guys notice, 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 down, you see LF74. And in the next column, second one down, you'll see LF98. Those are actually our truck companies. We have a tractor-drawn aerial ladder truck company throughout the city. And those 2 resources will also bring an additional engine company, as well as up to 6 additional staff members to be able to staff that engine or firefighting company in the event of the brush fire. We dispatch a couple of command vehicles, as well as the necessary package to support the helicopter landing zone, and they would be designated as our helitap to go to a given helispot, which is also identified in the initial brush dispatch. The 2 points that I'd like to bring your attention to, which we now have included, which was indicated or alluded to in the first part of the presentation, the video, the first two markers there, UA1, UA2. Those are unmanned aerial teams. And now they are a regular part of our brush dispatch. And over the last couple of years, specifically since 2017, our drones and the drone teams that operate them have proven their value to the mitigation of wildland fires here in the city of Los Angeles and abroad. We're working to expand that even out to the federal wildland areas, given the proof of their value. Just as an example, using the wildland, using drones in our mitigation process, instead of sending 5 engine companies, that's 20 people, out to walk the land after a fire is out, searching for hot spots, using the drones and the infrared cameras that they're equipped with, instead of having to search where the hot spots are, those drones can be used to specifically identify those areas, and they can pinpoint the location of hot spots now. That capability has allowed us to, one, reduce the number of resources that we need to mitigate hotspots. But when a brush fire causes a mass evacuation, it has allowed us to significantly reduce the amount of time that it takes to get people rehoused. Obviously, we want to be able to ensure that a fire is out and that we're not putting people back in harm's way. Using the drones to confirm that the fire is out, and having a means to give our incident commanders that assurance has allowed them to lift those kinds of evacuation orders much faster than they ever were able to do in the past. Next slide. So again, this just got details some of the information that is provided to the dispatcher, and me as the incident commander, I also have a mobile data terminal on my command rig, and I'll see this same display on my vehicle, so that I can not only know the resources that I have at my disposal, but it allows me to properly track them and account for them throughout the duration of the fire. Again, the UAS team now being added to the dispatch was a significant accomplishment for our team, because it says to us that we have adequately proved to our administration the value of adding the drones into our response matrix, not just as an afterthought, but actually as part of the resources that are used to fight brush fires. That kind of concludes the initial part of the presentation, or my part. Very happy to, again, introduce David Danielson, who's going to take the next part and really speak specifically to our drone program, which we all are very proud of. Again, Dave brings a wealth of knowledge, not only from the aviation side of things, but an extensive military background as well. In fact, he actually, military comparison to the fire department, he actually outranks me. So I should call him sir. But again, a lot of kudos to Dave, and I'd be happy to turn this over to him for his part of the presentation. And thank you up to this point for bearing with me. Dave, on to you.
All right. Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Marcus, for giving us this opportunity. We're going to move right into a quick video, and then I'm going to give you a presentation on brush inspections using the drones. All right. So you got some of the imagery there. We'll see if we can get it posted for you because it's got a really good soundtrack. And I know Scandinavian people love good music. So with that said, let's talk about our drone program. LA Fire Department has had our drone program going, as Chief said, pre-2015 is when Chief Fields began working on policy and really resourced out to some subject matter expertise that we have on our department. Myself and my co-lead pilot, Derek Ward, were brought in. Derek has a really good background on the technology that was really starting to develop back then. My background came from my naval aviation experience, where I had served over 26 years of service. 22 years of that was flying as a helicopter crew chief. So very much understanding aviation and aviation safety programs. And as we were bringing this technology on board to the fire service, we quickly realized that we needed to develop a true air operations program. It's funny because as our friends over in both Stockholm Fire Brigade and law enforcement can tell you, that using drones was kind of like the toy that became the tool. But in truth, when you look at it and how we fly it, you have to have a significant understanding of aviation safety. So as you see in my slide, safety is the #1 priority as we implemented this new tool into fire service. Next slide, please. So as Chief alluded to, we're talking about using drones for brush fire. And I'm going to more focus on the pre-brush fire, specifically our brush inspections. But whether it's flying a drone before an incident or during an incident, you have to understand that, you know, we're working in an airspace, and very much the same as our national airspace in the United States. Scandinavia and Europe have their own regulations of aviation safety. So just a really quick look at what we're dealing with when we fly a drone. On the left-hand side, you see an aviation sectional chart. This is what the pilots are using to understand their airspace. Los Angeles is very complex. A lot of stuff going on in our airspace. On the right is what our FAA provides our commercial drone operators, what's called the UAS facility map, or LANCE map. And you'll see that it has a bunch of boxes that give different altitudes that we can fly. Typically, these LANCE boxes or facility boxes are around an airport. Everything you see in green has a number in the middle of the box that says the maximum altitude we can fly. Everything in red typically is not approved until we get approval through our air tower or air traffic control. Next slide. So what we've been able to produce so far with the drones that we're using, as Chief discussed, initially using the drones for thermal imaging, obviously on a incident, being able to get a camera in the sky, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So getting that camera and being able to live stream it to the incident commander is a huge value to them for immediate risk assessment, to be able to understand what is happening right there in front of them. But on the back end of it, and really where it shows a lot of value, is what you see here. We're able to create brush fire maps using a couple additional GIS or geospatial tools. So we're fortunate, again, as Chief discussed, we have a lot of resource on our fire department. We have our own GIS unit. However, for smaller fire departments, you don't need all of that. There are software programs out there that specifically can give you this type of imagery. So specifically here, we flew the drone, and literally in a fraction of the time that it would take firefighters to walk the footprint of that fire, we're able to produce that map, print the map, and be able to give it to the incident commander for ongoing assessment. So if you had a campaign fire that was lasting for days, if not weeks, this is a product that can be provided to the incident commanders, not only to the incident commanders, but for all the firefighters that are working this incident to really build their situational awareness. And again, it's a fraction of the time and literally a fraction of the manpower to be able to create this. Next slide. So just a real quick overview on how we do this. We use a mapping software that ties into our GIS unit. On the left-hand slide is kind of a picture of our Los Angeles area, and all of the files there are different, what we call KML files, but they're basically the data that identifies the parcel or the boundaries of the area that we're looking at. On the right-hand side is kind of a blow-up of one of those boundaries, one of those files. And this is great. These drones, literally, you can let them fly in an automated flight fashion or an automated flight mode to fly specifically that area. Next slide. So this is how we break it down. We create a file of the area we want to fly. You can either have a pre-designated map file, or you can draw it out yourself. So obviously, we're not going to have pre-designated boundaries on a wildfire. So we can draw that out to whatever size and shape we want, then select the flight profile, the altitude, the speed, how we're going to manipulate the camera, and then let it fly its own track. Literally, we're flying just approximately a minute an acre, where the drone is able to capture. And I may have dropped off. There we go. All right, next slide, please. So again, here's some other examples of how we're using the drone. What you see on the right, the bigger picture with all the little camera icons in it, is an actual parcel of land that we did a brush inspection. And this is really what I wanted to focus on, to use the drones before the fire starts, to be able to start doing inspections before the dry season comes or before the Santa Ana winds start kicking up. We are now training our brush inspectors to go out and use the drone, to fly the drone, do a big map like this, and then if they see specific hazards, they can take a photo of it. So that next picture in the middle would be what we call a point of interest photo. All of this gets uploaded into our intranet system, which anybody can pull from within our command structure to understand what is going on in that area. So it has a very unique opportunity to create not only an immediate hazard assessment, but also to archive historically to see what's going on with that land, which is very important. Next slide. So again, here's an example of using our GIS system and creating a fire map and all. Why it's important to create these maps and how the drones are helping us do this is because historically we will see fire burn in similar area or the same area over time. So as the brush grows back, we can create a history of the scarring of the land and typically start creating predictions of what's going to happen when we get these Santa Ana wind scenarios. So if ever we had a fire burning in this area, we can quickly pull up these drone maps to see, what that looked like and predict potentially where the fire is going to go. The other value of this is once you have a flight plan or a KML file that you flew, you can fly your drone exactly the same flight that it flew historically. So if I took this map back in 2019, and I wanted to fly the same flight again this year, it'll fly the same altitude, same speed, and take the same number of photographs. So you get an identical photo to compare what the vegetation looks like, and you can do, an actual assessment. Next slide. Other examples of how we're creating this, every red dot that you see right there is actually a hot spot during an active fire. So this is what our incident commander may be seeing when the drone flies. We'll give them this map, and on the computer, they can see where the actual hot spots are geolocated. So like Chief Fields discussed, we can direct firefighters directly to those hot spots, and also use the drone as a pathfinder. So I'll fly the drone directly to those red points, and the fire crews will walk directly to the drone and begin their work there. And you think about that, that's a huge reduction of manpower, a huge reduction of resource and effort, and you've mitigated risks that could potentially lower your injury, your firefighter injury potential. So a huge cost savings when you think big picture down the road. Next slide. You saw this before, it's just a little more blown up, but again, these are large swaths of land. I think on the border on the left there is approximately a 50-acre parcel. And again, on the right is the brush inspection plus all of the point of interest photos. So what you're seeing, that whole picture is what the drone photographed. You can expand it out and literally see the detail, the brush, because it's a high definition photograph. Next slide. So just to close this up, because I know we wanted to get some questions in, but this is one example we're working on, 3D imagery during a fire incident. I know it looks a little melted right now, so we're working on it. But all of the different markers that you see on that is tied into what we call our AVL system. So we know where all of our resources, our engine companies, our truck companies, our rescue ambulances are located during an actual incident. This photo was taken by our drone that you can actually manipulate. It's a 3D model, but it also identifies where the resources were located during the incident. So when you think about an after-action review, when the command staff reviews how we handled ourselves, the drone is a great training tool afterwards to discuss how we train our firefighters to respond into an incident. Next slide. So with that said, I know it was short and sweet, but that's why I like having Chief Fields first, because he gives a lot of great information. Certainly, I am thankful to Marcus and the Verma team to allow us to present to you our brush response and how we're bringing this new technology to work, both in pre-fire planning, using it for brush inspection, and then ultimately on the incident themselves. Drones are an amazing tool, and I know our friends in Stockholm and the other Scandinavian countries that are using drones today, we all recognize it's a small community of very passionate people like our team, and we're all sharing and communicating. So again, thank you for the opportunity. With that, Marcus, we'll turn back to you.
Thank you, David. Very interesting from both Chief Fields and David. We have some questions. I have from a friend of yours, maybe Michael Aspelin from Greater Stockholm Fire Brigade. Maybe you know him.
Hi, Michael.
He is curious about how you coordinate the drones and the helicopters on the same incident. How do you coordinate them?
So I'm going to pass to Chief in just a minute, but I'll tell you, our very first flight in 2017 was the Skirball incident, which you saw in the first video. A lot of that large fire along the freeways was the Skirball incident. And we had the opportunity of flying with our Helco, our helicopter command, coordinating our drones in an area where we could provide thermal imaging, and the helicopters can continue to fly at a higher altitude. So, Chief, can you talk about Helco?
Yeah, absolutely. So the overall, the idea has always been, if manned aircraft are in the air, then drones shall be grounded. In fact, our very first policy back in 2007 specifically stated that. And the overarching reason for that was the aviation world's perception and perception of people who fly drones, which are typically hobbyists or young kids or whatever. The stark difference between manned aviation world, which is full of policy, procedure, training, so on and so forth, and the drone world, which is just grab one and fly it. And it was really just a lack of confidence and understanding about drone operations and what they could expect. And largely led by Dave. He's very, very humble about this, but he worked with our aviation, with our manned aircraft and our air operations in developing their standardized operations. And we were fortunate to have that expertise brought to our program, because we basically mirrored that. And when our helicopter pilots got to see and physically witness the level of training, professionalism, and really, like Dave would say, the aviator's mindset that our drone pilots had, it started to change their perception. And so they became quickly less adversarial and really saw the value in using drones and started to welcome us in. It created opportunities for us to have conversations, to develop practice, kind of policy, and kind of a standardized operation when manned aircraft are in the air. Exactly what the expectation is for the drone operator. Either that the drone would stay at a specific location until the helicopter entered into that flight space, and that they would communicate where they wanted the drone at the time, or vice versa. We would let them know where the drone is operating, which altitude, and in what space, so they could stay away from that. And that coordination and communication has worked out very well over the last couple of years. In fact, our current policy now does not say that the drones have to be landed, but that coordination must happen between the lead pilot and either the air operations branch director or the person in charge of the air operations, which locally would be Helco. So huge advancements on that, and that's because of the professionalism of our program. But that's critical, I would say, in any time you want to integrate drones into an arena where manned aircraft is about bringing up the confidence of those pilots that drone operator is going to be as professional and as responsible as they are.
Interesting. I have also a second question here from another department in Stockholm. One moment, please. Do you use fixed wing RPAs when you're flying?
So I smile because that is absolutely where we need to go, in my eyes. We have a tiered response, currently a tiered response model. We've just introduced a tethered drone system with our command vehicles, so that we're immediately getting the technology at an altitude. Then the second tier of that would be our quadcopters, which everybody here knows or is aware that, quadcopters are great, but they're great for direct line of sight. Our Achilles heel, the problem with them is the battery life. You got about 20 to 30 minutes of operating time. So the next tier that we're going to move to in the future is recommended to be vertical takeoff and landing, fixed wing drone capability. And if you watch the industry right now, that is exactly where public safety for large departments like our own or a regional mutual aid program should think about, because you now have two plus hours of operating time with the same technology of optics and the capability. So it's an investment that ultimately I think will pay dividends down the road. But it's definitely where we should be looking at to move beyond the short range capability we have.
Thank you. Another question here coming in is do you have any way of transferring the pictures from the drones to the firefighters working in the fire on the ground? Do we have any such abilities?
So the capability early on, we were looking at developing live streaming capability. Early on, I had purchased a radio or a RF frequency transmitter from Amazon, right? We cobbled this thing together, and like most of my UAS friends out there, all have had this similar experience. If there wasn't something on the market, we were gonna build it, right? So we got an RF transmitter receiver, and we were live streaming directly, or I should say we were transmitting directly to the incident commander. Since that time, live streaming capability has become very, very popular. There's a lot of options out there. We do now have the ability to live stream through the internet anywhere in the city. Now, understand, any IP address streaming is going to potentially have lag. So you need to think about who are you sending the imagery to, and how timely does it need to be? My preference as the operator, as the pilot, is to transmit directly to the incident commander so he has real-time value. But if we wanted to go out then from the command post or the command position, that they live stream that to wherever they want it. So yes, incoming resources could pull up a smart device, an iPhone or an iPad, and be able to see imagery as they're coming in to start thinking about what they need to do. That's a huge value. On a larger incident, we can send it to our disaster operational center or even to our government officials to be able to see the potential of what has occurred if it's a disaster level type of incident.
Sounds great. I was interested a little bit by myself of the chain of command, from drones to helicopters to waterbombing. Who takes the decision in a larger incident?
So I'm going to pass that one to Chief. Who's in charge, sir?
Any great any leader worth his salt recognizes that he's not in charge, that the people that are doing all the work are truly the ones that are in charge. But if you repeat the question, I'll try to answer.
No worries. I was just interested in the chain of command, from drones to helicopters to waterbombing. How does it work? Who has authority to call in resources in this when you're starting with the drones?
Yeah, so the incident commander ultimately is the one who requests the resources based on their assessment of the problem. They make the request for whatever resources that they deem necessary, which would include asking for the drones to be involved in the incident. During the incident, even though the incident commander makes a request for the resource, it's still the responsibility of the drone pilot to coordinate with the other resources, whether they be the resources on the ground via radio, or the other air resources via a specified channel or a pre-planned, set of rules. And then there are times where, due to conditions, either wind, visibility, or other factors, that the drone pilot is ultimately responsible for determining whether that mission can be flown. Very similar to a manned aircraft pilot. So there are several layers of communication, but we ensure that everyone, whether they be the boots on the ground, other air assets, or the incident commander, everyone is in the communication loop before, during, and after any drone flight takes place.
Okay. Do you collaborate with other instances like the armed forces, the military, when it comes to reinforcing larger incidents? By example, how do you connect within different kinds of the governmental institutes?
We don't have, at least in the Los Angeles.
They also have fixed wings drones, I imagine, within the military or in the Air Force. Are they involved in any way?
Not at this time. We in the Los Angeles area specifically, we don't have say military bases or active military bases that have an air wing where they would be involved in the wildland firefighting because we're geographically where we sit. Because we're boxed in by the forest, the federal, the United States Forest Service is probably the largest, federal agency that we would collaborate with in fighting brush fires. So it's normally their agency that we work with. They do have a large contingency of drones as well, but they don't have a well-established process for using them across the region. It's more of what I've found, or what we found, is more of a kind of a local, that a particular forest may have a robust program where they use them a lot, where the next forest over maybe not so much, and they have not yet truly standardized their use of drones, specifically in the mitigation phase. They may use them in an ancillary fashion, but that's our only real coordination with any outside, completely outside agency currently.
Are there any particular innovations around drones coming in the future that you think is extra interesting for your work?
You're going to have another Werminar for that one.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Amazing, the technology, just in the short period of time that Chief Fields and our team has been working with drones. It's funny because we showed that first video that has our Matrice 100 kind of showcased, and that's like the Volkswagen of drones, right? It's a very simple system. Today, I mean, you're seeing changes in technology with LiDAR. That is amazing. I'm sure most of the audience here has seen some of the imagery where they're finding archaeological digs down in the Amazon because they're able to look through vegetation. Well, using LiDAR and other forms of optics, you can do vegetation studies. We're using it in hazmat, adding sensors for like detecting specific chemicals and gases, or radiological metering, using it in the industry or industrial world, from electrical grids to oil well inspection. It's always been a partnership of public safety and the industrial commercial realm, because frankly, whatever, say an oil well emergency plan looks like, the fire department or public safety that would respond there will add to that, or adopt and add and share. So we're seeing that right now with drone technology as well. A lot of sharing's going on, a lot of development in these areas for not only the optics, but the sensors. And I would bet, going back to your question about VTOL or fixed wing, we're going to see some major changes in battery, on how batteries can become more efficient in the next few years.
Sounds great. I think that was all. I am extremely happy for you guys that you were able to participate and to talk in our webinar today. I hope the audience had a good time listening in to Chief Fields and Firefighter David. Thanks, guys, and I hope when traveling is allowed again, that we can come visit you. At least I know Henrik from my crew would like to go to LA and visit you. And thanks for now. Thanks for this time. And take care, guys. And we talk later.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Tack så mycket. Ha det.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.